Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight for Leading Beyond Barriers with Bill Barkeley. I just want to take a moment to thank Whitney Riley for providing captions tonight. Thank you very much, Whitney. Bill Barkeley continues to accomplish the seemingly impossible despite vision and hearing loss due to Usher syndrome type 2. Even if you've heard Bill speak before, perhaps you were at Convention 2010 when he was the keynote speaker, I know you're going to enjoy tonight's presentation. He is humble, he's amazing, he's inspiring, and Bill, I'm really honored to have you tonight. I'll go ahead and let you get started.
Hi, Nancy.
Oh, you know what? Before you do, I just want to remind everybody, if you have a question for Bill, just type it in the Q&A. You should see the Q&A tab on your menu at the bottom. Could be at the top of your screen, but probably at the bottom. Hit the Q&A and type your question, and I will voice those questions to Bill when he's done with his presentation. Okay, now you can hit
it. Hi, Nancy, and hi to everyone in the HLAA community. It's a pleasure to come back and talk. Leading Beyond Barriers is something that we all do every day. Loss is the third most common health condition in the world. It's serious, and it's something that people should know more about and have a lot of awareness around. But more importantly, with a group like this, I'm going to just share some ideas and thoughts about what I've learned on the way, but they are by no means a prescription or telling anyone else what to do, as much as it is some of the insights and understandings that I've learned in that journey. So for those of you who are not familiar with Usher syndrome is characterized by severe to profound loss of hearing before the age of 5 in my particular case. And then in my late teens and early adult years, I started to lose my vision. So Usher syndrome type 2 is a progressive condition affecting both hearing and vision, and there are no treatments or cures currently at this time. And so each decade is really a march, I like to say, into further darkness and silence. And so the next slide, Nancy, is showing you is one from Helen Keller, which is a great quote, which is you're always constantly adapting and changing, but learning to be content where you are, and building your balance and construct for how you want to navigate the rest of the world from that day forward. So a lot of people ask the question, you know, what's it like to be blind, and what are the challenges? And the same thing on the deafness side. And so for those of you who don't know, on the blindness side of it, I would say that it's a lot about navigating the world from a 3D perspective and understanding spatial orientation and being able to navigate safely, swiftly, and easily in a world that's very visually driven in that sense. And so as you lose that, it becomes more and more difficult to work your way through that. So there's lots of hassles, irritations, and frustrations and injuries and things that can happen.
There you are. All right, let's unmute.
Sorry for that. We have no idea what happened, but we're back.
Okay, good. And you even sound stronger now.
Okay, good. So we were talking on the deafness. Deafness, I thought, was largely a volume thing, but as it turns out to be, it's much more complicated. So as many of you know, it's about spatial orientation. Where is the sound coming from, and where are you in relation to it? And feelings of confusion or security. Another, security and fear is a big one with sound, and it relates to a good sound and bad sound. And then the other thing with deafness is also the ability to understand the emotions that people are expressing in their voices, you know, whether they're angry, happy, sad, those types of things. So, and the nuances associated with that make it a very complex set. So those are the two things that I worked through. And as all of you know, there's a lot of challenges that relate to isolation, depression, just having that connection to the larger world. because it is a very social world, so to speak, that we're trying to always connect into. One of the interesting things that I had the opportunity to do was to go to one of the first papal audiences ever for the deaf community. And the message that was there is not one that's religious in nature, as much as what it really speaks to is the challenge with hearing loss. And the conversation the Pope was talking about was there's two dominant cultures in the world today. And one is the culture of exclusion, where we place people in groups based on ethnicity, race, nation, political beliefs, the way they look. Anything can be used as a basis for excluding people. And people use that as an opportunity to enhance their advantage and placement in the world, and sometimes hurt others. The other culture of the world is the culture of encounter that he talked about, which was really similar to the journey to Jesus walking from town to town, that he was not so concerned about going from one city to the other city, but that was on the way from one city to the other, he stopped and talked to the blind person, the deaf person, the leper, the prostitute, the tax collector. And what he did was he looked them in the eye and simply met them where they were at. And basically he accepted them for who they were on the human journey. And he called that the culture of encounter. And so what I found about that was really just this focus or perspective and mindset that we're always going to be faced with the dominant culture in the world around us. And it's really about taking the upper road with it and understanding that the more we try to encounter into our lives and in the lives of others around us, the more likely we will succeed. On the next slide, I really wanted to just share a message with you that Nancy knows about, because I did talk, as she mentioned a few years ago, at HLAA at the keynote, and just really share the message that regardless of who you are on the human journey, so to speak, especially with hearing loss and deafness, is that what's within you is stronger than what's in your way. And it's going to take a lot of experiences and challenges and barriers and obstacles and successes, and on that journey, for you to come to realize that really anything that you do will largely be because of what you decide to do, and that you define yourself in this world rather than the world does that for you. And it's easy to let everyone around you tell you otherwise, or to tell you the reasons why you can't succeed. But the reality largely is within us. 90% of the things that we can do in our life really is largely controlled by us and our mindset and our situation, and just working it a little bit harder, more creatively, and more innovatively, and you'd be surprised at where you can go. And managing the expectation that you won't master anything overnight, but if you continue to go step by step, you'll just build more confidence and the ability to think about what you can do next. It's kind of like not swamping the boat, but letting a little water in bit by bit, and just not being too concerned about how it piles up. On the next slide, one of the biggest things I found in talking to a lot of people and doing a lot of my adventures is that if I were to ask you what is a barrier, the typical answers I get in the group that I talk to are things like immovable, impossible, impassable, can't get around it, can't get under it, over it, it stops me cold. And those are all really appropriate and true things. But I think one of the things we need to realize a lot of times is that the dominant framework that comes into our mind based on a word that we hear, sometimes we need to stop and to think about that in a newer way, with a different perspective and a fresher perspective, and say, well, what really comes out of barriers, or what are barriers for, or what are obstacles and challenges, and how can they be harnessed differently? Because if you go at the same wall over and over again and nothing ever changes, then you probably need to think about doing it differently. And that's always our challenge, is always constantly adapting and changing to connecting to the world around us. So I like to talk about barriers as providing tremendous amount of gifts in the world. That if you continue to take on barriers, for example, you're going to find out, hey, if you get knocked on your tush, are you willing to go at it again? Well, what you learn about that is what's your level of determination? What's your level of resolve? Then as you continue to go after something, what's your level of spirit? How much do you really believe in taking something on and changing it? And then as you go through it, as you realize that maybe you need someone else's help to get over a barrier or challenge in your life. And that's when you find out things like community, teamwork, and embracing other people in your world that are the ones to help you harness and overcome the obstacles that you're facing. So sometimes engaging the world differently than just simply looking at it as you yourself is probably one of the most powerful things you can do. So what I like to say is that barriers and challenges are difficult and real, and they have their things that they're associated with them. There's amazing things that come out of them by taking them on. Sometimes you're just going to fail completely. Other times you're going to struggle and work through it. But over time, you're going to start to learn a lot of things about yourself and about the world around you and those that are helping you as you take on the biggest barrier in your life and the challenge of your life. So I encourage you to embrace barriers and challenges, just even the word that's put out there before you. Not to be intimidating, overwhelming, or to tell you that you're destined to fail. It's just telling you that what you have to look at and what you face first, and then how you start to think about how you're going to overcome it is probably more important than the fact that it's in front of you at all. And a lot of times when I'm doing my talks and everything, this conversation applies to anybody. You don't have to have hearing loss. You don't have to have physical challenges or disabilities. You just need to understand that words have meaning and they create mental constructs. But sometimes the biggest thing that determines our mental construct is ourselves and what we think of a word. And we tend to go more towards the negative than the positive. So sometimes to break out through things that are frustrating and completely holding you back is to look at it differently. And then you find yourself overcoming and you find yourself transcending. Because if you take on the risk of overcoming something and all that work, you don't want to just overcome it. You want to come out of that feeling of transcendent, feeling more confident, feeling like it was worth the risk, that you learn something about yourself, that you get an energy to say, hey, I want to go for more, and I can see a bigger world out there. And so what's within you is stronger than what's in your way. But a lot of times, how you think about what's in your way is your biggest barrier to your future. And I encourage you to think about barriers all the time. Think of them as being the greatest thing that could ever happen to you, as opposed to the worst thing that's holding me back. On the next slide, I didn't know where deafblindness was going to take me. I don't know a lot of people. We're 25,000 people in the world, or US, and 100,000 people in the world with Usher syndrome. So a person along that way who's riding on this horse with me is Eric Weinman. And many of you who know people in the blind community, he's a rock star. He is the first and only person to have ever summited Everest completely. And so he became a friend, and I was talking to him after he wrote a book, To Touch the Top. And the struggle seemed so similar to mine that I said, I need to know more about this guy. But I also wanted him come and have him talk to hearing and vision groups. And that was the beginning of what became a 10-year friendship. It's a friendship and also one that I will also say faith. Because he helped me build a rope team of people to help me do my first adventure, which was to get up Kilimanjaro. But then he also became a life mentor and helped me understand, since he was blind pretty much since the age of 12, what it's like to navigate the world without any vision at all. But then he also asked me to engage and help him change the perceptions of how people see people with disabilities or challenges in the world. So he had started a nonprofit 10 years ago, and he asked me to be a board member with him. And what we do is we work with people of all challenges in the world, all racial backgrounds, all economic backgrounds, any type of challenges that people face, whether they're physical and obvious or mental or hidden. We're there to help people figure out how to get past the barriers and challenges in their life. And so one of the greatest things in going after my adventures was all the doors that opened up because I decided to do one adventure. People started to ask me to do different things, see different things. And really, that's when the beginning of my journey began. By taking on the biggest challenge in my life, really just opened up a whole series of whole new doors. And that's why I encourage people to take on any goal, because it's in doing so that you start to find your barriers, go over them, and then start to realize that there's more at the other side of the table. So Eric and I, in the last 10 years, had met hundreds, if not thousands of people with no arms and no legs that have climbed Kilimanjaro. We're talking about blind people doing it, deaf people doing amazing things as well, people in wheelchairs, missing limbs, climbing, rock climbing, running marathons, doing anything, horseback riding, expeditions around the world, you name it. But we asked them, you know, when they come together and we're working on projects together, how did you get there? And how did you know you were on the right track? And it's kind of like thinking about the secret sauce. It's like, how is it that some people are making that transition from barriers and challenges and then moving on to the next level? So we asked them and shared the stories, and once we got through it, we were able to define a series of what we call life elements. And I'm going to walk you through those life elements. And all I'm saying is that when you look back on a person who had a massive stroke, maybe at the age of 14, is paralyzed on the left side, but he just decided to somehow become a Paralympian cycler. What's going on? What's happening there? Same thing that happens with Mandy Harvey, who's a friend of ours in our community that many of you may know. She was a music major in Colorado. She had perfectly normal hearing, suddenly lost it all, went deaf. And then Mandy, 2 years ago, was on America's Got Talent. And Mandy took her shoes off, sat on stage, and ended up fourth in the competition for America's Got Talent. Well, how did Mandy do it? What happened? That's what we decided to find out and what we want to share with people around the world. So I'm going to share this with you real quickly, and at the Q&A, a lot of your questions may revolve around these. On the next slide, Nancy, the first one is vision. When we say to people and hear their stories, we find out that they just had a huge vision for themselves. There was a purpose that inspired them to give their best back to the world. So, for example, it's one thing to be a marathoner or someone to decide to climb a mountain and let's do Everest, for example. And they do it for what I call the testosterone athletic induced, the adrenaline rush type of thing. And bucket lists and those things are great and they're wonderful. But really, you can only do so many of those in your life. What we find is that for people that continue to go up and down, kind of surf through life, because it's always going to be up and down, but you don't want to get drowned, is that you need a purpose that gets you up in the morning, makes you feel like it's worth going on. And so as a result, vision for me was that I wanted 10 years ago to climb Kilimanjaro. The reason I wanted to do it was, I get to go cool climb and go to Africa. But it was really about realizing that assistive technologies were changing the way that people would live, work, and play. And that's why Nancy had me come to HLAA and talk to them back in 2010. It was after climbing Kilimanjaro, I was one of the first to use Bluetooth technology that allowed me to use a microphone wirelessly and not have to use rope to climb with my expedition team. And then I used night vision technology to help me just see the feet of the guy in front of me so that I could walk on my own 2 feet to the top of the mountain and be the first deafblind person in the world to do it. My purpose was that if I could do it, I could get the word out about these great technologies and they were going to change the way. And look at us 10 years down the road with these technologies and all the things that are giving birth to FM technologies, the ability to do car captioning things, to be able to use the internet for communications, Facebook and social constructs, being able more people using sign language and all of these other things. It's amazing what's happening for people. So vision is important to you, whatever you want to do moving forward and where you are in your life. And so I encourage you to think about it. Why are you doing it? Is it for you, or is it for something that you can contribute to the world at large? So on the next slide, you'll see there I am at Kilimanjaro, probably one of the most surprised people that you can imagine. But it was the hardest thing physically, emotionally, spiritually, and mentally that I'd ever been through. I had to think a few times about whether it was worth it. And if I failed, would I go all the way back to Africa again and start over? And I'd have to say that I did, because I knew that I wanted to get the word out, and I knew that most of the people watching me were just glad that I was giving it a try and a whirl, and they weren't just judging me on the success or failure. They were just inspired by the fact that I would even give it a try. And so as a result, I learned a lot about that, particular part about myself, and that was the question of adversity, which is the next slide. One of my porters, I was really struggling to breathe to get to the top. And I kept just breathing so hard, I said, I'm getting sick. I think I'm going to need some medication or maybe not make it. He just started laughing like crazy. And I'm like, why is this guy laughing? I'm like, I'm really scared. I'm not so sure about this. And he said, yeah, he said, you're just breathing so hard. You have to go all the way down there and stuff. And he said, your body's got 1/3 the oxygen of regular land. So he said, the one thing I can tell you is when you get home, your wife will love you because you're going to have rock hard abs. So he said, you're not really in trouble. You just need to keep going and move forward. And the message he also told me was adversity is your best friend. He said, once you get closer and closer to your body and mind coming together, you realize what you can and can't do. And I had that feeling. And I've learned to realize that that's not something to be avoided or to be run from. It's something to be taken and taken on and taken with my hands and like rain, go through the struggle, push through the struggle, and you come out stronger, more confident, and you realize you went a lot further than you ever thought you could possible. One of the other things people talk about in the next slide is reach. These stories that people do amazing things with the challenges that they have in their life, they say, I just had to reach. I had to go be out of my comfort zone. And it was only then when I realized that I was truly knew what I was made of. So shortly after Kilimanjaro, I left my 25-year job as a corporate sales and marketing person for a Fortune 500 company. And I went home and I realized that my gifts for Kilimanjaro were about doing things with the deafblind community directly. It was about being an advocate for the issues that were out there. It was also about being a public speaker. No sooner than I got home from Kilimanjaro, within a few days, I got a call and I was on Good Morning America with Chris Cuomo, talking about the impact of hearing loss on people in this world. I didn't set out to do Kilimanjaro and then end up on Good Morning America. It's because of the gifts and what I was trying to do that I was able to have the platform to share the message. And so I realized that I was becoming somebody different. So to reach, I had to rebrand myself. A corporate warrior was now, on the next slide, a deafblind adventurer, advocate, and storyteller. And I created my business card, and that's what I started out to be without knowing where it was going to take me. But really, it was also the first time I just put it in writing, and I defined who I was. I accepted that I was deafblind. I accepted that I was an adventurer. I accepted that I was an advocate. And I accepted that I had a story to tell. And if people would listen, I would have the opportunity to do it. So on the next slide, you see the world opens up. And it always looks different from a different perspective once you decide to open up. And by going for that first adventure of Kilimanjaro 10 years ago, almost 11 years ago, new doors opened with new mountains to conquer and places to go. So I continued to climb. It's all about building momentum for what I call an ever elevating life. So I become a global ambassador. I talk to people. I share my journeys as it relates to hearing loss and vision loss and what I think I've learned and what others have told me so that I can continue to live better and better days. So the next slide talks about pioneering, another element of all these people, these amazing stories tell us. They said, well, it's never been done before. Like my friend Kyle Maynard, he's classic. A thalidomide baby, his mother had taken the drug, so he was born with no arms and no legs. But this guy decided to take sections of tire, wrap it around his existing limbs with duct tape, and then he takes 17 days to climb Kilimanjaro. That's what you call a pioneer. He decided that he wanted to do it. He'd been an owner of CrossFit gyms in Atlanta. He realizes that his everyday life is all about innovating every single day. It's prototyping, trying things in new ways, doing it in a way people hadn't thought possible. Because he decided he wanted to get out there and be in the game, whatever that game is. For him, climbing a mountain, physical fitness, challenging himself in those ways, that what makes him do it. So that forces him to innovate. He didn't decide not to do it because everybody says you can't do it or it hadn't been done before. He's like, well, I'm going to do it, but I'm going to have to think pretty hard about how I do it and then build a way to make it happen. So on the next slide, I'd like you to think that everyone always, when they see me, for example, could say, oh, the deaf blind guy, well, how is he going to do this or that? And the real message is that I really don't see it that way. I don't see there's any reason why deaf blind people can't climb mountains, run marathons, run businesses, be engaged in so many other things in the human experience. But I'm not naive enough to assume that I'm going to do it the same way, or that the way that everyone else is doing it is the most effective way. So I take on a lot of the work, but I realize that I see myself, I have tremendous opportunities, possibilities, and potential. I'm just going to do it differently. So in my book, it doesn't surprise me that anybody would want to do these things, because we all want to challenge ourselves. On the human journey, we all want to have three things. We all want to have meaning, we all want to have significance, and we all want to have impact. And if we can do that on the human journey, then it makes it an amazing life. And I think that anybody that's born in this world can have an amazing life. It will be harder for some than others, but it's possible. So let's see where life can take you rather than you take on life. On the next slide, I have a real passion for building the next generation. Having been born in the 60s, I didn't have a lot of the resources available today. I was trained in oral lip reading. I did not have any tape recorders. I didn't have any IEPs. I didn't have any special accommodations in school, other than just simply having the front row in the classroom. And so I really felt that I wanted the next generation in America between, let's say, the ages of 14 to 21 to embrace hearing loss, be empowered by their hearing loss, and share with the world the power that they could have. And so over the last 10 years, I have focused on a series of 4 different expeditions that I've done with teenagers, specifically with hearing loss. One was to the Amazon, to the headwaters and rainforest. Another one was to the Grand Canyon. Another one was to Machu Picchu. And then this last June was to Nepal. I'll share a little bit about more of those with you guys later. But the point here is that in order to pioneer, it's important to pass what you've learned on to others, have them embrace it, and then we start to see where the roots of change can happen. If it starts in our families and our communities, then it can change the world. On the next slide, you'll see that people talk a lot to us about their journey and those stories, and they say, you know, I could have never done it without all the people on my team. And that's a powerful message, because in the American culture of things, we find ourselves, you know, as a very independent culture. But sometimes it's very, very important, if not more important, to be interdependent, to ask for help and to bring other people in. So when you think about people that are climbing mountains, they get on a rope team, and one person's in charge, and then everybody symbolically grabs a rope, and it's called on rope. And whenever that person's leading, everybody says, you're the one, you make the final call, I'm on board. They come from all over the world, different perspectives and educations and life experiences, but it's understood that if we're in, we're in, and our goal is to make us all get there. And it's important that we do that in our lives and realize that in order for us to succeed, especially with challenges, is that you need a rope team, and you have to go find them and build them one by one. In the next slide, you can imagine what it'd be like for a deaf blind guy like Bill says, I want to hike across Spain, which I recently did a few years ago, 3 years ago. So we want a backpack with only a backpack for 530 miles. And the deaf blind guy wants to be safely taken across the south of France into the tip of Spain. A lot of people say, well, that's crazy. I'm not taking that on. A blind guy, deaf guy, we're going to get lost. Look at all those arrows over there. It sounds like an exercise in confusion, frustration, and just downright crazy. But you know what? There's certain people out there, when you put things out there and you talk to them about it and why you want to do it and where you want to go, they jump on board and they say, hey, I can see that this is possible. I'd be willing to entertain. Let's talk about it and see where it'll go. So it's important to do it. And that's why when these ambassadors come forward with the kit to go through things, their parents, when I tell them they're going on a deaf expedition to the Amazon, the parents, most of them are like, and they're going with a deaf blind guy? This is crazy. But the ones that are smart realize that we got a good program and a curriculum and we've gotten everything taken care of. What's important is where you want to take the kid on the journey. And the journey is to a stronger self. To understand what's in them is stronger than what's in their way. And turning on the gas so that they want to embrace who they are with their deafness and move forward. So I'd like to show you a video of what they say after they finish one of these expeditions. And that's the next slide, Nancy.
It's been really eye-opening. Like, everything we've done has taught me so much. As I was growing up, I had my deafness, and that was a huge disability and a huge obstacle, but I had IEPs, I had my cochlear implant. We went to Signalis and Yuma, seeing a lack of deaf education and like needs there. And to see these people, to have none of that and to be stuck where I was before, it's just devastating. It's made me realize like how much we have at home and how much we have left to do in the world.
It's great to see that there's people who are like me. Yes, we're both deaf, but like we're not different. It's great to connect on that level because it's a level that nobody else can really understand. I thought before I went on a trip, like I can't do certain things. I can't do this. I can't do that. And now that I've realized I've done it, like on the trip, I'm like, I've gotten to know myself and I'm like, wait, I kept saying I can't. Just to be pushed out of my comfort zone so often was, like, it just showed me that I can do whatever it is I don't think I can do. And being away from home for so long reminded me like I'm my own person. And I think it's so important for people, young people especially, to realize that.
It's saying, well, yes, you struggle, but you still have your ability to intermingle in these different cultures, despite my disability.
If you have a chance to travel and your hearing loss is what's holding you back, you have to break down that barrier. I'm finding that inner passion in myself from this trip. Anybody who's in the program is bound to be changed.
Just hearing about the fact that there's a lack of audiologists and speech pathologists, it just made me realize that while I was already considering those two careers, it made me want to actually go into those careers. And that's why I had this one where it clicked for me. When I get home, I feel like I'm going to be 10 times more motivated. How about to, be who I want to be, It just makes me confident. It makes me want to, take advantage of all of these blessings that I have so that I can use them to help other people.
Just contributing to this trip with, empowering all these deaf students. And that's powerful because they will take that empowerment and they will go off and they will impact others in a positive way.
So they became a very strong road team when they came back. But imagine the teenagers going into an experience, they're thinking like, oh, a week's vacation potentially, going to a foreign country would be a lot of fun. They thought they would meet a lot of people like them with cochlear implant, hearing aids, and other things. They met a lot of deaf people. Unfortunately, when they got there, none of them had cochlear implants. None of them really had any medical intervention at all for most of their lives. The cutoff age for deaf children in the education system in Peru is the age of 15. Many of them never get past first grade. There is no special education system or IEPs to support a person in Peru. And what happens typically in many cases before the ages of 15 or so, the young women in Peru are forced into prostitution. And the young men who are deaf find themselves dying of alcoholism and drug abuse typically in their late 20s. These kids learned a lot about what they came from the US and what the deafness journey had been like. They saw barriers and obstacles that simply blew them away and changed their entire life perspective. They did it as individuals, but they also did it as a rope team. And then afterwards, they went out and they created projects for which they were sending money back down to Peru to help them create jobs and help those who were deaf in Peru. So it's important to have ambassadors so that they can share their perspective and have the experience that comes from their heart. And that's always another story that we hear as people share those journeys of struggle in their lives. Another element of the stories that they tell us about is what we've called alchemy. And it's about taking your life experiences and turning it into an optimism. You've got everything going against you, and you've gone up and down, but you still come out optimistic. So I like to say alchemy is a great word because it's the word alchemist, which in the Middle Ages was really about turning your lead into gold. In my particular case, as an alchemist, my job is I'm deafblind, but I don't see that as defining me. That's simply where I start. And so I create my life from there. Take that lead and turn it into gold. And the next slide, I've also learned about how important it is for how you engage with the world. And one of the things that I talk a lot about is that I have every reason in the world to be bitter and angry. Society will give me a pass and say, you should have every reason to be isolated, lonely, and despair. And I have those days, no question about it. But there's some people say, well, don't be so hard on them. All those things are all true and appropriate. But the biggest lesson that I've learned is that by taking on the challenges that I have in my life and suffering visibly and sharing it along the way, that people can engage better. They understand me better. They also come closer to me and attracted to me because of the things that I've taken on in the last 10 to 15 years especially. They want to be a part of it. They want to figure out how they can help, and they want to keep the momentum moving forward. So I want my message to say that it's okay to be bitter or have a bad day. But really, our biggest calling is probably to suffer, and to suffer well. And in it, we're going to find the greatest gifts to continue to persevere and have resilience to living a life that we never thought possible. So in the next slide, your life is how you see it and how limited the horizons that you want them to be. And so I built from there, but I'd also like to share with you one of my most recent trips, which was this last year to Nepal, which is the next slide. We took a very different group of teenagers in this last trip. We took kids of all of America's modern challenges, so to speak. Our curriculum, the one that I'm sharing with you through these life elements here, is currently traveling through the public school system here in the United States. It's part of the PE or athletic curriculum and also the diversity curriculum. So we're starting to get some traction in schools about helping kids understand and see things. But we also, it's one thing for me to get up there at my age and talk about my journey. But as far as teens are concerned, someone who's closer in age to them and their life experiences probably provides the most power to understanding how you can be an alchemist. So, for example, one girl on the trip we had was a victim of sexual abuse. And then what happened was that she was so distraught by all of that, went into drug abuse and addiction, and then tried to commit suicide. We had another one that was on the trip, was a person with cerebral palsy, 17 surgeries, 4 years in wheelchair, and is now currently working on being a Paralympic skier. We had another one who was a sophomore in high school who accepted a volleyball scholarship, full ride, to a very prestigious school. But she was also going skiing that day, and she went skiing that day and had a closed head injury. And she lost her scholarship and everything in 3 years of her life as she tried to rebuild her life from a brain injury. The stories go on and on. We had a deaf kid on the trip. We had a blind kid on the trip. The story that I would tell you about, kids in wheelchairs in middle school, for example, with a kid in a wheelchair where they took his wheelchair away, threw it up the steps, and made him crawl to get to the next level. It's disheartening and infuriating. But it's important that we build these resources in kids to persevere and to move on. So we went to Nepal, one of the world's mysterious places, the intersection of some of the world's oldest religion, the Himalayas, the world's highest mountain, and in many cases, people say the most extreme challenges. So we took them on this journey to go find themselves. And it was a wonderful and engaging journey. So on the next slide, I'm just going to share a quick synopsis of one story, which I just kind of touched on a moment ago. Imagine going on a trip when everybody's nervous and doesn't know each other, and then 2 weeks later, you have a completely different, profound view of yourself and the world. This person here is a person that I talked to you about, who had had the 17 surgery, had been in a wheelchair for years, and then also got out. Also a victim of bullying through Facebook and other media because he just wasn't the same. A person who's also gay. A person who, after getting out of the wheelchair, is sitting in there with custom-made boots and prosthetics. And he wanted to get out there and enjoy life. He signed up for this expedition. And the other interesting thing is he's one of the top 100 Paralympic skiers in the world. This is a person who makes you say, wow, that an alchemist in action. He keeps going, he keeps moving, and he keeps pushing. And that's what we all need to do, is we take what we have as our lead, keep pushing it, and see how we can turn it into gold. The last element that I'd like to share with you that I hear a lot about with people going through all kinds of challenges is elevate, the importance of elevation. It's really a very simple concept. Is that if you take something in this world, it's important to give it back. And in giving back, you're probably going to get twice as much as you ever gave. And that's what I talked about. You know, some of these things for adventures, you could say it's for athletic and, you know, the adrenaline. The last 10 years of my life, every 18 months or so, I've done a new adventure. So I did Kilimanjaro. Then I did those 4 expeditions that I've talked to you about. I've done 2 Boston marathons. I've done a 500-mile hike across Spain, and I've most recently done the Nepal trip. And they've all been wonderful, but every single one of those has had a reason and a purpose behind it. So the last trip to Nepal, which is the next generation of ambassadors. The Boston Marathon, which I thank my researchers for researching my disease. The hike across Spain, which for Usher Syndrome World Awareness Day, after 500 miles, I arrived in Santiago, Spain, on that day with my blog, sharing with the world my journey. So it's important to tell you that you give back. And then next slide, we can slip through real quick because I did talk about Spain, but it was really about getting to the end of the world, which is Latin. Finisterre means the journey to the end of the world. And it's one of the world's most ancient pilgrimages. But I'm going to use this trip because there's a video that was done at the end that I'm going to share with you. On the next slide, you'll see this is me with a South African filmmaker. Someone along the way heard about my story, asked to join me for the last few days, and unbeknownst to me until shortly before I left, said that they were hiring a South African filmmaker to come and visit me on my journey as I was going to do this for Usher Syndrome World Awareness Day. So in the beginning, my project was hike across Spain, do one of the world's oldest pilgrimages, go 500 miles, and I'll blog, and we'll see where that goes. And we'll get there on Usher Syndrome World Awareness Day, and the Usher Syndrome Coalition would benefit if anybody would make a donation. But as the story goes, and you continue to move, and you continue to keep going forward and keep giving, it turned out that person who brought in the South African filmmaker was the CEO of the world's largest vision organization. And so when they created the film, they launched the film and shared the story, but it went to 80 million people in the US and Canada and Europe. That's what I'm telling you about doing things that have vision and purpose and moving forward. You just do it, keep moving forward, but don't be surprised by what could happen and where it could go. And so in the end, what started out with a blog of going across and doing this and hoping to reach a few hundred people turned into a million. And here's what I had to say. The next slide.
Imagine if you've never heard a whisper. The mind starts to create questions. You know, is it me? What is it about? By the age of 5, I had lost 85% of my hearing in the low tone and 100% in the high tone. And then in my young adult years, late 20s, I started experiencing nighttime vision difficulties, and then found out that I was on a dual path with both deafness and blindness. The combination of the two is Usher syndrome. It is progressive, and there are no treatments or cures. Part of my journey is about adopting a no barriers mindset. My mission is to do an adventure project every single year. The purpose of which is to raise awareness and understanding around the issues of hearing and vision loss. This year, it's the Camino de Santiago. It is one of the world's oldest and longest hikes, consisting of 500 miles across the various parts of Spain. It's taken 3 people to get me across Spain. Then coming together with the BSP team and everyone else, we've got 11 people.
So I originally introduced Bill to VSP because we're in the vision business, and he was telling me about his adventure for this year. And I thought it would be nice to be able to spend 5 days reflecting on the past year, thinking about things that have gone well, things that we need to continue to do to improve our company, and really just get to spend time with Bill and hear more about No Barriers and what he's trying to do.
I have had horrible days. I've had exciting days, depressing days. I've handled some of it well, and some of it I haven't. And what I've been through and seen is that there's a lot of emphasis on avoiding pain, when the benefits of pain and taking on barriers and challenges is that it hones you, it refines you, it makes you focus, it makes you prioritize, and you realize that there really is nothing you can't do. You're just going to do it a little differently. I was forced to dealing with deafness and blindness and have to navigate my way in the world. And the decision is whether to fight what is in your life all the time or use that same energy to embrace it, but realize that every step you take is making you stronger, gain new skills for new experiences, and more confident in your life as you move out. And I just want to help people do the same thing moving forward.
My friendship with Bill means a lot. It's really taught me how to face different challenges that you see, and when I compare the challenges that I look at on a daily basis compared to what he's struggled with, it's nothing. And he's just such a wonderful guy with such a great attitude that you can't help but feel good after spending, whether it's 5 minutes or 5 days out on the Camino with him. He's just the best.
The goal is to realize is that we will all never have all the gifts, resources, money, or anything in our lives moving forward. What's important is what you decide to do with it. That's what defines you. Instead of hiding it or running from it, it's about embracing and realizing that life can be very uncertain, but the journey and the struggle is where the beauty of life is.
So the next slide.
Easier said than done.
No problem.
Hold on one second. It's waiting to finish here.
Yeah, it'll finish. Sorry. So now what we'll do is we'll open up to the Q&A, but these are the No Barriers life elements that I just told you about, and you can find them at nobarriersusa.org. But I encourage all of you to keep reaching and keep going. And maybe these things can help you on your milepost to figure out your next goal, next direction, and where you want to head in life. But I do want to thank you for the opportunity to share the message today. And I'm excited to answer any questions you have.
Thank you. That was quite a presentation. As I said, you're amazing and inspiring. I think this this graphic is wonderful. It kind of gives people some focus. So I was just wondering where your next adventure is taking you.
Right now, I'm trying to figure out two of them. One is to New Zealand, and the other one would be the Jordan Trail, which is a trail in the Middle East that is a new one that's opening up to the world for people to go through some of the ancient world UNESCO sites like Petra and some other ones. So it's like a journey of ancient civilization, so to speak. And you can hike it or bike it.
And you will be hiking?
I would like to hike. We've talked about biking, but biking sometimes goes a little so fast. You kind of like to get more immersed in the culture and where you're at.
Mm-hmm.
The difference of feeling like you're driving through somewhere rather than walking through.
Right. Well, I have no doubt you could do whichever you choose to do. You talked a little bit about depressing days. Is there a trigger for those kinds of days? And what is it that turns you around to get you on the right path again?
Yeah, my triggers are length of days sometimes. As I get into the evening, the tiredness of keeping up with the world, constant, everything going on, the chaos of the world, the sounds of the world type of thing. That's one of my triggers. So I know when I get tired and stuff, it's just best to rest, and it's okay to be alone, and it's okay to, do something along the lines of solitude. The other times I find that I do, because of the light challenges that I have with my vision and living in the northern climate, that I'm a definite seasonal affective disorder person. And so that messes with my hormones, that messes with my mental state. And so for that, I use a heavy dose and combination of exercise, forcing myself to get out of the house. Recently got a guide dog, which was, gets me, moving and making sure that I do that.
Mm-hmm.
The mental construct of focusing on the dog too has been a nice emotional support and companion, which I find is very powerful. And the other thing is that just simply getting the heck out of the Midwest and into somewhere sunny for some period of time is important. So I just get back into the travel thing, and then I find myself getting more energy and starting. So way I come back is I always pretty much figured that I have seen my emotional low in my life a couple of times. When it's so low, you just don't want to get up, or, you don't have the energy. And then I realized that if I just keep it simple, take a step here or there, don't overwhelm myself, that I get more and more confident day by day. And I just realized that a lot of times just getting comfortable with the fact that I'm just losing more vision, or that I'm losing more hearing, and that it's okay. It's okay to feel this way, but not giving myself permission to feel that way for the rest of my life. So it's this process of trying to be proactive in grieving for what you've lost, but that it's not all over. So that's one of my other messages I tell people. It's deafblindness is not game over, but it's a game changer.
Right.
So I'm always just trying to figure out how to play the game.
Well, that unfortunately was a very quick hour, and I'm sure that we could go on for a long time tonight talking. I have still so many questions for you, but if anybody does have questions that they think of after tonight and you'd like me to pass those along to Bill, just email me. I think everybody has my email address, so you can find it on the website. But thank you again, Bill. This was a great hour. And I welcome you to present anytime you'd like via webinar, or if you'd like to come to the convention. I know you can't come to Rochester, but
Yep.
There will be many more conventions, and
Yeah, you know, I'm always happy to help anytime. And really, any emails that any of you send, if you want personal questions answered, I do it all the time, and I'd love to meet you and be able to share anything I can to help you along in your hearing loss journey. So,
well, thank you very much. I appreciate it, Bill. You
yeah.
take care and enjoy your trip to California.
Yeah, thank you. See you, everyone.
All righty. Bye-bye.